I don't want to worry about healthcare and insurance and my mortgage. I just want to have a Slurpee and play Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 on my Dreamcast. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and welcome back to my Bands Who Should Have Been Bigger series. As you can probably guess from the title, in this series I talk about bands that I think should have been bigger, and for each one of these bands I kind of go through and talk about why I think that they had potential to be bigger, and then also why that didn't come to be. For this one, I think that I'm going to focus on 5 of my favorite pop punk bands that I think should have been bigger, because I've been doing a lot of like metal and hardcore kind of stuff recently, which is awesome. I love that stuff, but it's summer. And I don't know about you, I mean, I love Morbid Angel and Decrepit Birth, but you know, Decrepit Birth is not summer music. Like, you don't want to sit down by the lake on a blanket and eat a hot dog listening to Decrepit Birth. So yeah, before I get into it, I want to thank Drop for sponsoring this video. This video is sponsored by Drop, formerly known as Mastrop, and their HD 58X headphones, which I'm wearing right now. These are a pair of open back headphones, and if you don't know what that is, no worries, because Drop has a ton of great videos on their website that explain the whole thing. As somebody who listens to a whole lot of music, I really prefer open back headphones when I have the choice, because what they do is let in some of the room sound, as compared to closed back headphones, which almost completely shut out the room, and because of that, they can give you sort of a misleading picture of what it actually sounds like as compared to what the band and the producer probably wanted you to hear when they mixed it. If you're interested in learning more about open back headphones, just click the link in my description and you can see exactly how they work. And the best part, new users will get $10 just for signing up. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. All right, first up we have Unwritten Law. And this is a band that's more than one of my favorite pop punk bands. They might be one of my very favorite bands of all time. Like, they're probably in my favorite top 10 bands like ever. Fun little piece of trivia, if you know the Blink-182 song Josie, there's that line that says she likes UL and DHC. UL is Unwritten Law, DHC is Dancehall Crashers, so kind of part of the same cohort as Blink-182. They have, I don't know, maybe like 5 studio albums, all of which I think are good, but my personal favorite is the Black Album from 1998. And that album came kind of late to the game for like the SoCal skate punk kind of thing, which I think had peaked a couple years before. But even then, it really stood out from the pack because the songwriting is just so much better than pretty much everybody else in the genre. But I think the real kind of secret sauce with Unwritten Law is the lyrics. There's this really like dark, melancholy kind of quality to them, kind of like Motion City Soundtrack. I just really like that combination of these really sad, heavy kind of lyrics with upbeat, poppy music. That's like peanut butter and jelly to me. It's a combination that I will just always kind of love. There's a lot of stuff about like drugs and addiction and self-loathing and just generally feeling like you're a piece of shit that doesn't deserve to be alive, which fortunately at this point in my life I don't identify with, but there was definitely a time in my life when I did, and listening to these songs kind of takes me back to that place and makes me really happy that I'm not there anymore. Anyway, in 2002 they had a, I guess, semi-mainstream kind of hit called Seein Red that got some like radio and MTV airplay. They definitely had some momentum coming off of that album. I thought maybe they'd be like the next AFI or Newfound Glory, the band that would kind of break out of just being a punk band and end up being kind of on the lower tier of mainstream. But that ended up kind of being their peak, I think. They did put out another album in 2004 or 5 that was awesome and also had some level of success, but just never really got to the point that I wished that they would. And as far as why, well, I have a couple ideas. First of all, I think that their style just kind of went out of vogue. Like I said, they were already kind of late to the skate punk thing, and by the mid-2000s, the kids that would have been into skate punk a few years ago were now getting into emo, like My Chemical Romance and The Used and all that kind of stuff. So I think that Unwritten Law was maybe just a couple years too late to the game. Even as good as they were, you know, timing definitely matters. And second, based on, like I said, the lyrics, I think there were probably some personal issues going on there that held them back from really reaching their potential. They've been on like 5 labels, I think, which, you know, is not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, but it does kind of suggest they might be hard to work with. So my guess is that there was something going on there. And number 2, Fireworks.
I would do the same. This is not my song or a Jew, so beware. When the
These guys were part of that like 2010 to 2013 sad boy pop punk scene, which I'm actually getting really nostalgic about. You know, that like Tumblr pop punk era right after like the neon stuff was big, and then everybody started wearing like khakis and crew necks and snapbacks and talking about pizza.
I'm so stoked. That was sick. That was so tight.
It was such a cool scene because it still had that like fun, youthful kind of energy of pop punk, but it wasn't like as cringy as the neon stuff was. I really need to make a whole video about that like sad boy pop punk scene because it was totally a thing and I've never really heard anybody talk about it in detail. And Fireworks seemed like they were going to be one of the big bands of that genre. At one point, I would say maybe like 2011 or so, they were right up there with like Man Overboard and the Wonder Years and the Story So Far and State Champs as far as the bands that were really kind of the focal point of that scene. But all the other bands I just mentioned kind of went this way, and Fireworks just kind of, you know, didn't really get any bigger than they were in 2010. They sort of went quiet and broke up in I think 2015 or 16 after kind of not really doing anything for a while. Not really sure why they broke up. I don't know a ton about them personally, but I just kind of get the sense from reading between the lines that they just sort of grew out of that whole like genre. Two of them now have a band called Empty Houses, which to me sounds like Target Christmas music. Definitely not my thing, but it's really well done for what it is.
Holding on to you, maybe it was always hard to do.
But anyway, as far as why they didn't get any bigger, well, aside from potentially losing interest in the genre, I think there were two things. The main one is that they're like a classic example to me of a band that was very good, but not really great. And then problem number two is they didn't really have a super strong image like, say, Man Overboard with the Defend Pop Punk thing, or the Wonder Years with like Hank the Pigeon and all that stuff. Man Overboard also didn't really have truly elite, like A+ level songs, but they had an amazingly good image, and so that kind of made up for it. And when you are in that middle ground of having good but not great songs and a good but not remarkable image, well, you kind of hit a wall there, and I think that's what happened with Fireworks. Also, if you haven't noticed, I did start a Patreon maybe about a month ago, so if you're interested in checking that out, there's a link to that in the description below. And number three, Mest. That is M-E-S-T, as early 2000s as you could possibly spell that name.
Friday night, what's going on tonight?
If you're into that kind of thing, like Newfound Glory, Simple Plan, Good Charlotte, that era and kind of style of pop punk, you definitely need to check out Mest if you haven't. These guys have some of the very best songs in the genre, and as far as I know, they wrote all of them. They did work with Feldman on some stuff, but from looking it up, as far as I can tell, they actually wrote all their own stuff, which I always appreciate. They have several albums, all of which are good. My personal favorite is Destination Unknown from 2001, which is more of like the straightforward TRL style pop punk, I guess, for lack of a better word. They have another one from, I think, 2005 called Photographs, which is maybe a little bit darker and more mature. You know, usually when bands say that, that means this album is boring and it sucks. In the case of Mest, it doesn't suck, but it is a little bit darker and more mature, so if that's your thing, you might want to check that one out. Now, here's the thing about that album from 2001. It is a little bit cringe in that early 2000s pop punk kind of way. You will definitely find bleach blonde, frosted, spiky hair. You will definitely find baggy dickies and creepers. You'll definitely find sweatbands put up on the forearm for whatever reason. You'll find all that stuff there, and is it goofy and a little bit cringy to see in 2019? It is, honestly, but you know what? I do not give a fuck. If it's wrong to love dickies and spiky bleach blonde hair and write songs about how you don't freaking care what the jocks and preps at school think of you, if that's wrong, I do not want to be right. If I have any like hardcore or metal credibility, which according to a lot of people in the comments I don't, but if I have any of that, I would happily trade all of it to go back to that time. Like, I don't want to worry about healthcare and insurance and my mortgage. I just want to have a Slurpee and play Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 on my Dreamcast. But anyhow, they broke up in 2006, I think. They got back together in like 2008 or something. They've been working on a new album. They did a Kickstarter for it, so hopefully that will come out soon, and hopefully it will be as awesome as the world stuff. Hey dudes, are you ready to hear about band number 4? Chunk No Captain Chunk. So I mentioned these guys in my easycore video, but I really need to talk about them in a little bit more detail. Now, my friend Oshie from Beartooth and City Lights says that Chunk was the best of all the easycore bands, and in all honesty, it's kind of hard to disagree with him there. I personally liked his band City Lights better, I liked Fight Fair better, but if I'm being honest, it's probably fair to say that Chunk No Captain Chunk was the best sounding easycore band, and if I had to pick one song as being the definitive easycore song, it would probably be In Friends We Trust. I mean, that one line, "Hey dudes, are you ready to?" that is like peak easycore in "Hey dudes, are you ready to?" Peak easycore in 6 words.
Hey dudes, are you ready to?
That song came out in, I think, 2010, and on the back of that, they definitely had a lot of momentum from, say, 2011 to 2013 or so. They had that Kesha cover that came out on Punk Goes Pop number 4 or 5, or whichever one it was. That was a big one. They had that Smash Mouth cover a couple years later. They signed with Fearless and started getting a lot more label push in the States, and it seemed like maybe they were gonna break through. They did Pardon My French with Joey Sturgis in 2013, I think, and I thought that was gonna be the thing that put them over, but it kind of wasn't. And I think there are 2 reasons for that, or at least 1.5 reasons. The first one, just to be honest, is the language barrier. They were not great at singing in English. It always sounded a little bit weird. It didn't matter with In Friends We Trust, because it was sort of funny and endearing and it worked, but I think it just kind of puts a ceiling on your marketability in America if you don't speak fluent English. And I know they tried really hard. They definitely got better, but it still always felt a little bit forced. But yeah, they've been on hiatus since 2016, which usually means the band is broken up, but they've also said that they're going to come out with new stuff in 2019, so I hope they do, and I hope it's awesome. And lastly, band number 5, Strung Out.
Some days I'm up and some days I'm down. Some days I don't give a fuck about anything. 'Cause yesterday I gave everything, now I want something bad.
I actually hear this band come up from time to time in my comments, which is awesome, but still I have to say that I think they're underappreciated, and I really think and wish that they would have been bigger. Because back in the 90s, they were just outside, just on the fringe of what you could call the big 4 of skate punk, NoFX, Pennywise, Lagwagon, and Face to Face. Strung Out was right at the edge of that. And for good reason, because they were fucking awesome. My friend Lee and I used to call them the most metal pop punk band, because that's pretty much what they were. If you listen to Strung Out, it sounds a lot more like Ozzy played in double time than it does punk, like the Sex Pistols or something. It sounds like what it is, which is probably a bunch of heshers from the Valley playing as fast as they fucking can and calling it punk. The drummer is hands down one of the fastest in the genre. The guitarists are just total fucking shredders, some of the tightest rhythm picking you will ever hear in a punk band. Listen to this. But they weren't just shredders. They had really catchy melodic songs. And even to this day, that combination of being super shredders that can play their asses off, but also have these really catchy, melodic, poppy punk songs, I think is still kind of a unique thing. I can't really think of any other band that sounds like those early Strung Out albums. So speaking of early Strung Out albums, that brings me to, in my opinion, why they didn't get bigger. The first one is that they lost their bassist, Jim Cherry, in 1999 after putting out their 3rd and, in my opinion, best album, Twisted by Design. And although Jim was just the bassist in Strung Out, I think he was the most talented songwriter of the bunch, and losing him really hurt the band. Just to kind of give you an example of how talented he was, he also played guitar and wrote most of the songs in Pulley, who are an awesome, super underrated skate punk band.
Not asking myself to do
And he also had another band called Zero Down that only put out 1 album, but you can totally hear his fingerprint all over that. You listen to Strung Out without him, and it's super obvious what they're missing when they lost Jim. And unfortunately, he died in 2002 when he was only 30. Super sad to lose anybody that young, especially somebody that talented. And the other thing that I think held them back was just lack of that really over-the-top charismatic frontman. Singer of Strung Out does a great job of singing, but he's not a Fat Mike or a Fletcher from Pennywise or something like that that's gonna just dominate the spotlight. I didn't really understand this at the time, but looking back at it, it's super clear what a factor that was, with NoFX in particular. Musically, Strung Out is superior to NoFX in every way, basically. But the difference is Mike. He had those really clever lyrics. He's great on stage. He's just got that larger-than-life, charismatic personality. Whether you like him or not, and a lot of people don't like him, he was an awesome frontman, and I think a huge part of NoFX becoming that successful. And Strung Out has just never been that kind of band to like put themselves out there like that. Anyway, so I would highly recommend that you check out their first 3 albums. The ones without Jim are still very good. They're a little bit darker, more like rock or metal, but still very good. I personally prefer the first 3, so I would suggest that you check those out, especially if you're into bands like Death by Stereo or A Wilhelm Scream that do that kind of shreddy punk kind of thing. All right, guys, that does it for this edition of Bands Who Should Have Been Bigger. Let me know in the comments what you think about these bands, what other pop punk bands you think should have been bigger. Let me know also if there's another genre that you think I should focus on in another video. And also, I want to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon at the True Cult level or above. And those people are Alexandra C., Andy B., Anthony C., Jeff W., Jordan H., Justin H., Luke S., Michael B., Militant Me, Nick G., Radley H., and Ryan W. You guys are true cult fans, and I appreciate your support very much. All right, guys, that's it for me. I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.